Loving greetings to you, my church family, on this Wednesday, March the 17th, St. Patrick's Day. 2 weeks ago, for our midweek devotion, we heard Emily Clark Munoz, daughter of Jim and Anna Clark. Tonight, we hear her again as she reflects upon what this church has meant to her, in particular those people whose lives and whose witness not only mothered her faith, but continue to inspire her faith to this day. I trust you will appreciate it. I know I did. Let us encourage each other.
When I was home for Christmas a few months ago, my parents and I walked down Macomb Street on Christmas Eve I'm not actually sure what. I'm not sure I ever got the details straight. There were candles to light and a tradition to uphold, and I don't know much beyond that. However, it must be noted that Jim and Anna are exhausting and enthusiastic tourists, even on their own block. And so I have just reframed it as the Christmas Eve walk with the objective of seeing every single luminary that was set out. As my mother waxed poetic about light in the darkness, and my father wandered haphazardly across the streets trying to, I think, find the best spot to stream the global singing of Silent Night, I noticed the cornerstone of your church. Some of you might know that there's a contemporary worship song by the group Hillsong that talks about cornerstones. The lyrics are, "When darkness seems to hide his face, I rest on his unchanging grace. In every high and stormy gale, my anchor holds within the veil." In our reflection that talks about what I've learned from you and from growing up in First United Methodist Church, a place that prioritized traditional music, and Vivian Norwood's insistence to, 1, not photocopy choral music that is covered by copyright, and 2, to not allow one's voice to swoop around to make the melody more dramatic. It seems pretty heretical to rely on contemporary Christian worship music as an example, but that's where we are. Anchors, cornerstones. I spend a lot of time looking into darkness. Most of these days, that darkness belongs to other people. Regardless, something has made me unafraid to do it. And I believe deep down that it's the lessons from this church, from you, that form this foundation of certainty. That you all lay a cornerstone, not only in my heart, but in my habits. I suspect that this is true for many of you. And so as I share my own reflections on this, I invite you to start thinking about it as well. Because it strikes me that I have looked to members of this congregation to learn what to do when it's hard in general, and also how to think about myself when it feels hard to be me. In many ways, this church taught me how to love others and to love myself, which sounds pretty simple, but how profoundly important. When I'm faced with darkness and storms, I rely on what you've shown me. I rely on the lessons of our Mary, and the other Mary. Not the biblical ones in this case, although important, but Val, Pritchett, and McConnell. Mary Val invited me to Sunday school every week. She left the lessons in our mailbox. She handed me coloring pages, and I'm pretty sure she put me on a mailing list. But it was never aggressive. She did it from love. She showed me the concept of circling back to make sure that everyone felt noticed, to make sure that there was always an invitation, not just a standing invitation, but a current, active one. She taught me to invite and include with specificity and persistence. Other Mary. I think of Mary McConnell a lot these days, partly because of her ubiquitous glasses chain. In these COVID times, anyone who has experimented with the concept of the mask lanyard has got to just stop for a moment and remember Mary McConnell and the glasses chain. However, there were other more important lessons. Like the time I went to Lake Church by myself and I had no one to sit with. I remember definitely not feeling cool enough to sit with the youth and desperately uncertain of myself. I'd wanted to go to church that day because we had just got back from Lakeshore and I wanted to take communion. I was spirit seeking. And I saw Mary McConnell and I sat with her. I will never stop being grateful that she allowed herself to be sought out, that she opened herself as a refuge. It must be noted that I also got one of those terrible coughing fits during the service, like the kind where your eyes water and you're kind of convulsing and it's just a big mess. Horrifying for someone who was really self-conscious. And she also gave me a cough drop. The small kindnesses, may we acknowledge them. May we never forget them. May we hold them close. May we pay them forward. And how many times in these past years have I thought about Mary Pritchett, about how I didn't know what she lived through as a caregiver. I only knew that I considered her a woman of great love and great service. And I suppose now that those things may be more consistent than I could have ever guessed. I think of Lynn Solomons, who would rush in to teach our Sunday school class with this energetic, open vulnerability that I always admired. At that time, she was adjusting to major life changes of her own, but she always seemed to be in awe of the life force around her. Even when the life force came in the flavor of two fearless boys who were constantly surprising her with both tenderness and low-level medical emergencies. Miss Lynn, when I saw that you had married Mr. Solomons, I literally took heart. I think about how we all watched Margie Steele stand bravely to lead the choir after loss had leveled her. I noted Tom and Molly Gallion's example of a blended family, and I pictured their faces and their family on so many occasions when I've wondered about the ways we hurt and the ways we heal. Laura Brown, I kept going because I knew you had not stopped. Janice Noble, every time I love a child that does not belong to me, I do it because you showed me how. Carla Field comes in strong with the big and necessary affirmation that my father's jokes are not always that funny and that sometimes he just needs to settle down a minute. Miss Doris Jackson, you were one of the first people who made me proud to be me. Every time I've doubted my ability to reach out to children who are grieving, I've changed my mind because Dawn Below trusted me with the church nursery. To whoever hung up the sign that used to be in the choir room that says, treat people as they are and they stay as they are. I think that might be a Goethe quote. Whatever, it doesn't matter because you threw down a subtle imperative that I've never been able to forget. Tori Byers, now McLean, with her family, showed me what it felt like to be included. Vicki Smith, Phyllis Pritchett, Nancy Gallimore, Lynn Gibson, all of the guiding lights of our youth group. I could go on for days, and I will, because I will continue to enumerate these gifts, these lessons of hospitality, of generosity, of inclusion, of kindness, of joy for the rest of my life, because they are the basic values on which I rely. And they are the things that I return to, the cornerstones that I trust when tragedy and trauma rush in for people around me, and I am the one who must hold firm. If you're younger than me or new to the town or the church and you don't know these names, I suspect that you can catalog similar acts of familiar compassion, but with different names, and maybe with different lessons for your own life, because it's happening all of the time around each of us. People are showing us how to live, how to grieve, how to move forward in an imperfect world. They are doing the hard and burning work of transformation and restoration against this backdrop of incredible normalcy. After all, remember, we left Jesus during his wilderness time, a time when our Prince of Peace is being tested by the Prince of Darkness, and 20 miles away, someone is just buying figs. We learn as much from stunning events as we do from everyday hurts and graces. Right now, Someone is living through the unspeakable and not knowing if they can keep going, while someone else's dream is coming true. Everywhere, all the time, just like it has been in the enduring lessons that you taught me and each other. So this week, I urge you to look back at the lessons of church with new eyes. Write them down. Who taught you how to be who you are? Who is helping you now? Who needs to be seen? Whose gifts need to be noticed? Whose contribution is shaping the world to be better? Who showed you how to be? What comprises your own cornerstone? On whose lessons do you rely every time you need to remember who you are to yourself and who you are in the world? What we all know is that there will always be darkness and there will always be wilderness, but there will also be the truths of grace and community on which we can depend. So today, I want to thank you for showing these to me and to each other.